The War of Wolves, written by the last Retinue. The night was black and snow sprinkled down upon the Fairlands. The depth of winter had hit its peak, and the harsh winds blew down from the mountain peaks and across the barren fields. For this winter was more harsh than the last. A pack of wolves howled at the vibrant moon and dashed across the snow-covered ground through the thick pine forest, searching for their next meal. Led by a large warg, the wolf pack became desperate and looked down upon the dimly lit village below, for it has been days since their last meal. The name of the village was Killithwin. Hearing the sounds of laughter and distant voices, they looked at one another and suddenly darted rightward, for they heard a predator, far greater than themselves, move towards the high vantage point. The sound of footsteps crunching on the ice-laced snow ground became louder and louder, for another pack were on the move, and their eyes were fixed on Killithwin. The small hamlet of Killithwin was created as a crossroads between the capital city of the Fairlandian kingdom, known as Dallensrock. The kingdom of the Fairlands was separated into 3 petty kingdoms, the petty kingdoms of Sealand, Asterfell, and Dallensdale. Sealand hailed to the west, and Asterfell hailed to the north. All 3 kingdoms had their petty kings, but Ruthard Asterfell VI ruled over them all and had the title of Grand King. Stability in the kingdom was declining from a year-long drought, and many adversaries laid waiting across the Asterian Sea to the south. In response, King Ruthard Asterfell dispatched himself on a diplomatic mission to rekindle relations and secure food for his people from trade relations with the mainland Hellenian Empire. With Ruthard's vassals awaiting the news, domestic relations between the lords began to deteriorate. The Lord of Amberstill Breeze, Devon, gallops his horse to the nearest stable in Killithwin. Pitching his reins, he looks up at the hanging lantern above him, the famed tavern in all the land. The Hanged Lantern Inn was one of the oldest taverns in the Fairlands. Many rogues, royalty, and mysterious strangers have entered into this rickety, reliable establishment throughout the ages, with one thing in mind: cold drink and another to cheers with. Located outside of the capital by many miles along the crossroads into the heartland of the Fairlands, all who travelled through the mighty plains, monstrous mountains and fairy forests have dined here along their journey. Devon looked upon the old stricken farmhouse and grabbed for the door. In a moment's time, the door opened in a flash, and a lady in a long, hooded black robe holding the collar tight knocks into Devon and looks at him nervously for a second. She stutters to apologize and quickens her pace down the road without looking back.
Strange,
Devon says as he cracks the door a little more, revealing the packed inn. The light beams out into the dark, lonely snow-covered gravel streets and slams the door, leaving but a small brazier lighting the town centre. Devon shakes the soft snow off his dark brown cloak and unclips the clasp as he looks upon the lively crowd of men and women. The loud clatter of tankards and laughter polluted the small space, allowing Devon to enter unknowingly. He unveiled his hood. Devon had long, light brown hair and had a hard jawline, which was covered by a small grizzly beard and mustache. A solid defense against the winter's breeze, he told his young ones. On his person were 2 swords, one short, the other long, as well as a boot dagger, a small one-shot crossbow, and an apple for his steed Nibs. He wore all leather like a ranger and blended in with the town guard, for being a lord in public could cause unwanted attention. Devon dodged and slipped through the crowd of dancers, drinkers, and laughing patrons. Smiles and camaraderie were shared by all in the Hanged Lantern Inn. Devon came to the bar and knocked on it 4 times in a timed motion. The bartender Clarice came from the basement, holding a barrel of ale, and lifted it on the bar.
What can I do for you?
Clarus paused, and his eyes widened in delight.
Lord Devion, a most warm welcome to the generous lord and friend of old. How may I be of service? I heard thy knocking, but as you can see, we are doing good business tonight, and my ears have deceived me. A pint?
Yes, that will do. Bring up another barrel as well. We must speak of matters. Easy speak.
Aye, if you say so, my lord.
Clarus brings up another barrel from the basement and satisfies the crowd of patrons that grow ever more blissful. He pours a pint for himself and Devion, clanking tankards and drinking their first sips as old friends do. Clarus, being a large, brawny man with a long moustache and a booming laugh, slumps over the bar into Devion to hear what he has to say.
I travel from home to the capital to speak to Sarilok, the king's steward, on if some coin can be spared for wheat for my people. I have had no dealings with this man. What do you know of him?
Aye, my contacts say he is a hard man to follow, and harder to follow his books. He is shrewd with coin, and only accepts deals if the payments back are as secured as ink on paper. He's been in the king's service for 2 years now, but none really knew his name until the Grand King left for the Hellenian Empire. That is all I really know, Devion. There was a coordinated effort to clean the royal house, barracks and castle grounds of any potential spies. Many of my men never returned home.
Devion remained silent as he watched Clarus sigh under his breath.
Never returned, you say? And do you know of their fate?
Well, if they were still alive, I would not be here, would I?
Devion nods.
You always knew the highest quality Clarus. I presume they will show up in time. All I knew was a name before. Now I know a personality. One I have dealt with, even in my own court.
They both remain silent for a moment. Devion then lifts up his pint.
For the men that never see the next sunrise, for they will be missed and in our hearts can never be replaced.
Aye, I can agree to that one.
Clarus says, while lifting his tankard and drinking it down. He refills his pint and looks towards the door.
Devion, I must ask this. Are you planning on laying claim on the throne? The people are starving, the leaders are lacking. You have what it takes to restore the kingdom back to its original state, a strong country filled of proud, valiant men.
Devion looks at the crowd behind him and back at Clarus.
Even if the divinity blessed me with next in line, I would restore glory to this land. I was gifted, however, with 9th in line. I have my kingdom. It is Amberstill Breeze. All of these lords and petty kings can bicker on land rights here and there, tariffs and trade rights, common grounds and private estates, all they want. I do not want to sit at the table of children, dressed as men and hunger for glimmering rocks to see their own reflection.
Aye, always a poet, always. Come to think of it, maybe the king should have asked you to travel to the Hellenian Empire. I mean, you protected the emperor after all. You would have an easier time seeing that you killed for the man.
There are many in the Fairlands that have, but you are right. Better a veteran warden of Hellenia than a king for negotiations.
Devion smiles and points his beer at Clarus.
Did you perchance get that item I was acquiring for many months ago?
Clarus looks confused. His face soon lights up.
Oh yes, I did. I placed it around here somewhere. Trust me, Devion, it was a hard item to find. Here you are. A merchant from the Far East was selling it in Dallan's Rock. I snagged it the moment I saw it. Learn from the best.
Clarus digs through some shelves and hands Devion a music box. Devion smiles and puts it in his pocket. He then stops suddenly and holds up his hand and looks towards the windows.
Do you hear that?
The distant sounds of clanking swords is heard through the walls of the old tavern. Devion looks out the window to a roof starting to set ablaze, and a group of dark-armored men outside the tavern door. Devion looks at Clarus.
Clarus, get your hammer.
The doors of the hanging lantern burst open. Dark male armored mercenaries rush into the building with spears, axes and maces and start slashing at the patrons of the tavern. The raid of Kelithwyn has begun. Chaos ensued. The Kelithwyn guard inside the tavern begin to fight back, but being ambushed, they are quickly overrun. Devon pulls out his sword and throws himself in the fray, slashing away, parrying the raiders' attacks. Clarus throws a barrel at the raiders and pulls out his hammer from behind the bar and rushes into the fight. Outside the inn, the dark armored raiders start shooting fire arrows onto the hay-roofed building and setting the wooden structures aflame with mighty torches. Arrows rain down on the civilians as the town guard are outnumbered and outmatched. The snow began to run red, and the sound of armor-clad soldiers clashing into each other could be heard across the valley. A brute of a man with long, thick black hair with a scar running across his mouth and forehead is seen pillaging the village and ordering other raiders to search the town. He is a vicious fighter and wears only black, dyed, mail-laced leather. He carries a top-heavy sword jagged at the tips and wields an axe as he desecrates the village by spilling the blood of his victims. Devon, battling in the tavern, realize they are outnumbered, for it is only him and Clarus defending their position. Clarus grabs Devon and throws themselves over the bar.
Into the cellar, now!
Clarus yells. They enter the cellar as the raiders try to follow. Clarus closes the cellar door and locks it 3 times over and slides his hammer into the handles.
This will keep them busy. Follow me, Devon. I know the way out of here.
Devon sheathes his blade and follows Clarus behind some shelves into a boiler room. Clarus pushes on the stone wall that acts as a door that leads to a small room with a ladder. Clarus points at the ladder.
This ladder leads you to the back stables. Grab a horse and go. Those cellar doors won't hold for long. All I can do is help my lord.
Come with me, Clarus. Leave this bar and seek refuge at Amberstill Breeze.
Clarus looks back at the boiler room.
You have your castle, Lord Devon Asterfell, and I have mine.
Devon looks upon his friend.
Let the sun guide you on your journey, Clarus.
Devon pulls out his short sword and gives it to Clarus. Clarus grabs it and holds it tight.
Farewell, my friend. I will be waiting for you on the other side. Now, go.
Clarus looks upon his friend and closes the stone door, leaving him in the dark. Devon opens the hatch above him and lifts himself from the small space and falls onto the snow. The bodies of Caelethwyn's civilians lay in the streets as the raiders begin to search the houses, and the screams for men and women could be heard in the streets. Devon looks over to the front of the Hang Tavern to see the man with the scarred face. Devon's stomach drops, for he knows this man. It was Castius Thalin, a man bred for war and malice, an unforgiving soul, a man with an unquenchable thirst for violence. Devon pulls back his head and breathes heavy. Looking to his right, he spots a horse and jumps on it. He commands it to ride and refuses to move as the flames start to engulf the hanged lantern's roof. The horse becomes spooked and starts banging on the stable fencing. It won't budge, and Devon becomes enraged in fear. He unsheathes his longsword and swings at the fence, cutting it deeply, freeing them both. Devon rides into the nearby forest. The raid of Caelethwyn continued until there was nothing left. Caelethwyn's streets were full of debris and the deceased. It was a massacre. The raiders, however, were displeased, for they were searching for something. Castius, in his rage, executed his second-in-command and brandished his anger to the night sky. The raiders burned the rest of the village down and left the site in a bloom of smoke until silence. All was silent in the streets of Caelethwyn. Soon from down the road came a woman, dressed in a transparent white gown, began to sing. A young girl who hid from the raiders in the far bushes saw this woman and realized that she was praying to the lost souls of Caelethwyn, for she was the angel of death and was guiding the souls of the deceased back to her kingdom. Devon held the reins of his horse tight, traversing through the forest. The hoofs of the horse, slamming on the snow, muffled his sound, for Cassius did not hear him escape. The loud scream of a woman could be heard in the distance. Devon, looking at the stone-chiseled main road leading to his homeland, thought for a second, weighing the options in his head. Time was of the essence. He turned the reins and headed towards the noise of the woman deep in the woods. Devon urged the horse to move quickly through the pine trees, and soon he was now in a clearing. On the ground was a woman in a dark hooded robe, and 3 mercenary men around her as she laid unconscious. They turned to Devon and began to form a line slowly, talking amongst themselves. Devon got off his horse and walked towards them, for they were raiders from Castius' party.
For crimes against the king and the peoples of these lands, I sentence you all to die by the sword. Yield to quicken your death.
Devon spoke clearly and without hesitation. One of the helmed raiders spits and slams his axe against his shield.
The king won't be paying us a visit anytime soon. Good night. Now, prepare to die.
The 3 raiders begin to surround him, one in front, one to the far right and the other to the left. Devon, with a stone face, grabs his sword hilt and unsheathes it once again. Waiting for the raiders' first move, one yells and another jumps forward and back. Devon, unmoved from their feints, he awaits patiently. The raider to the far right runs forward and swings his sword. Devon deflects it, aiming his sword into the ground. The raider on the far left tries to body tackle Devon. However, he uses his force against him and lifts him from his feet and flips him over. Devon swings his sword at the shielded raider and kicks his shield, pushing him back. Repelling the sword raider's blows, Devon disarms him and chops off his arm and punches him. He falls to the ground, 2 versus 1. Devon anticipates the 2 raiders' blows and rolls to the ground between them and grabs his boot dagger. He throws the dagger at one of the raiders and is blocked by their shield. The raiders split apart, so one is behind Devon while the other is in front. They both attack at the same time. Devon ducks, parrying the axe raider's swing, allowing him to stab the raider in the chest, and rolls away. It was now 1 versus 1. The raider yells in anger and swings his sword in a frenzy, allowing Devon to grab his dagger from his shield, parrying his blow rightward and stabbing his dagger into the raider's neck. The final foe falls to the ground and all is silent. Devon looks upon the battlefield and drops his head. He sheathes his dagger and sword and feels a sharp pain. He looks at his arm. A cut ran down his top forearm. He falls to the ground and curses aloud. He grabs his dagger and cuts the cloth of one of the raiders' clothing and bandages his forearm tight and looks over at the woman. Still unmoved, he walks over to the woman whose face is still slightly hooded. He reveals her face and looks upon a 16-year-old girl with red-brown hair, pale as the winter snow and feeble-looking. She laid there unconscious, for she was hit in the head by the pommel of the raider's blade. Devon looks around his surroundings, grabs her and lifts her up.
Now, girl, you are safe.
Devon places her on his horse and ties her tight. He then mounts the dark brown horse and gallops out of the forest, putting pressure on his forearm and holding on to the mysterious girl, heading towards the province of Amberstill Breeze. Devon mustered his remaining strength and carried on through the night, riding at a quickened pace through the main Fairlandian highway. Traveling through the plains that expanded outwards, he began to spot mountains on the far horizon. He was close. The wound on Devon's forearm ceased bleeding. However, his mind was hazy, whether from blood loss or lack of sleep. The adrenaline from battle had drained him. He stopped for a minute and looked back at the mysterious woman, her head still bleeding. Devon slashed off a clean piece of cloth he had on and wrapped it around her head. He tried to speak to her, but there was no response. Devon knew He must quicken his pace. He rode down the highway and turned right on the fork where he entered his birthright's land, Amberstill Breeze, an area of large rolling hills and mountains that stretched across many miles that bordered the Frostmane Forest as well as the Pale Forest. There were many small villages under Devion's domain. However, he resided in Amberstill Keep, a fortress located between two mountains. Outside laid a large village square with frosty farmland. Two gatehouses allowed access into the castle. One end leads to the Fairlands, and the other leading out to the Astarian Sea. Devion, now reaching sight of his home, his steed, which he now named Hazelnut, strutted into the village square. All alone, for the sun had not even risen yet. The sound of Hazelnut's hoofs echoed on the dusty cobblestone. Devion went up a slight hill until he was up against the iron-reinforced wooden door of Castle Amberstill. Devion looked up at the battlements and hailed the night guard. Devion waves his hand, almost unable to speak, and waits for the door to be fully opened. Hazelnut walked slowly into the safety of the inner ward. A squire boy of 12 ran in a sleepy daze towards Devion and his horse as they stopped outside the keep's entrance. The boy, grabbing the reins of the horse while Devion got off, said in a slow manner,
"My lord, where's Nibs? Who is this horse? And who is this on the back of your steed?"
Devion grabbed the mysterious girl and picked her up from the horse. Another guard came, seeing that he was struggling, and came to assist.
Take her into the guest quarters and give her food and water. Have the physician look over her and place a well-rested man at the door. I will want to speak to her once she is up and level-headed.
The guard nods nervously.
"Yes, my lord."
The guard walks off quickly with the girl. Devion places his hand on Squire Iraine's shoulder.
Nibs was lost during a raid on Kelethwyn. I was lucky that I survived myself. Take Hazelnut to the stable and make sure he is fed and has plenty of water. I owe him my life. Inform Marshal Hathard and the rest of my court. We must speak in the council chamber. Let them know of the raid. I must attend to personal matters first, but be quick. Time is burning. Go."
Iraine nods and quickly pulls Hazelnut along the inner ward towards the stable. Devion looks up at his keep and breathes heavy. He walks up the stairs and enters his keep, where the braziers are lit along the walls. The castle interior was all stone. The hallways had small braziers and torches roaring throughout the winter time. The doors were made of pine along with most of the furniture. Devion reached the uppermost level and entered into his personal quarters. A fire was lightly sparking in the corner with a hot pot over the flames. Candles were lit in the corners on iron cast holders. The doors to the outside balcony were closed as snow piled on the ground seen through the glass window. Devion looked upon his queen, Felithora, laying in bed covered in coats and furs, silently. Exhausted, he sat in the chair across the bed and breathed in relief, for he was home next to the woman that he loved. Devion rolled his head back and stared at the stone ceiling above him and focused on the wooden pine beams. He closed his eyes and remained silent, listening to the wind that breezed across the icy layer of snow, particles dancing in his mind as exhaustion hits and all went black.
Am I dreaming? Or have you come back to me, Devion?
Devion smiled as he heard Felithora's voice.
I have come back sooner than expected, and not with good tidings either.
Devion opens his eyes and looks at his wife still laying in bed and smiling at him.
Come to bed and rest. You are weary. You are wounded as well. What happened?
Devion gets up from the chair and looks out the glass window of his quarters.
Felithora, war is on the horizon, and we are not ready, but we are called to it. Kelethwyn was raided. Clarice decided to stay behind. My horse is slain, and I brought back a wounded girl who the raiders were searching for. I do not know who they were, but they were led by Castius.
Castius? That name is known, but I do not remember.
Devion looks over at Felithora seriously.
Castius Thalin was head warden of Helania. We protected the Emperor for 3 years on the battlefield during their conquest westward on the mainland. Castius and I fought side by side for many battles and were true brothers in arms, but his thirst for blood was becoming a domineering trait of his. He slaughtered a village on his own accord, alone. It was unacceptable, and the wardens exiled him, allowing myself to lead. For the last year of service, Castius vowed to destroy my home. In time, he said. Well, the time has come, and I will not let this man step on the fields of my kin. I do not know where his allegiance lies, but peace between the lords and kings of the Fairlands are sitting on a thread. My guess is that he will side with the highest bidder.
Devion sits on their bed and holds Felithora's hand.
You must be prepared here for battle calls for me once again. Secure the boats on the docks, and make sure there is one left for you and our children.
Felithora begins to cry and grabs onto him tightly.
Why must fate do this to us? Devion, do not leave me again. My heart can only take so much to see you now restless and bleeding. Stop, please. Rest with me.
Devion pets her hair, and they lay there together. Soon she falls asleep once again, and he lays her down on the pillow. Silently, he looks over at her, and again towards his land. The sun begins to rise. The beauty of the sun rays reflecting off the snowy tundra of their mountain refuge. Devion reminisced his memories as he looked down on his land. His wedding ceremony deep in the forest with Felithora. How proud he was towards his 5 children, and teaching his oldest boy to fight with a sword and ride a pony. The fond feasts and hunts him and Clarice had in the wilderness of the mountainside. Has it all come to an end? Had his fate been sealed? A tear dropped from his face as he looked back at his wife. He stood there silently. Devion exited his bedroom quietly and headed towards the council chamber located to the right of the small throne room stationed in the middle of the top floor of the castle. He entered the chamber bustling with chatter until he closed the door. All fell silent as Devion walked over to his chair and sat down. Looking down a long table of his most trusted advisors from left to right were Marshal Hathard, top general in Devion's army, Stuart Macoin's Breve, province treasurer, Ambassador Emery Lothloran, diplomat of Amberstill Breeze, Squire Iraean, who was standing, Guard Fernine, who was stationed at the mysterious woman's door, Katarana Shaw, head priestess to the divinity, and Roskov Newman, spymaster. Devion looked at his council and placed his elbows on the table.
As you were all told by Squire Iraean this early morning, there was a raid on Kelethwyn last night that left close to no survivors. Raiders overran the town guard, and by the time I escaped, most of the buildings were up in flames. Events will be unfolding soon, and we must act quickly.
A messenger enters the chamber silently and hands a scroll to Ambassador Emery, leaving without a trace.
My Lord Devion, I can assure you that the levies can be assembled in no less than 7 days. Armaments and supplies have been flowing through the dock. However, we are low on food and rations if we are to embark on a long campaign.
Marshal Hathard explains.
We would be 6,213 strong if our census is correct. It is not the largest army, my lord, but mountain men are harder than the most chiseled plainsmen.
Devion replies.
We could have 100,000 men at our disposal, but if we have no food, they are only dying for the crows, not our kingdom. Set aside 1,000 men and levy them as sailors. Let's protect our food trade line and use food for leverage if the war continues longer than harvest season.
Marshal Hathard nods slowly.
It will be done, my lord.
My lord, the coffers are steady. However, you know that wars are expensive. My calculations show we will have no coin by 8 months. Wages of soldiers, supply management, loss of assets along with trade. We might be broke in half a year. We can increase the tariff of iron ore exports to mainland Asteria. That way we can offset our credits.
As long as we switch our route northward above the Fairlands and halt all trade through the rivers. We cannot afford bad relations with mainland Asteria, and that means not losing our goods to raiders of the war. Propose a volunteer militia to protect the traders. Promise gold after the war ceases.
Stuart McCoynes writes down on a scroll.
Precisely, my lord. Very good.
My lord, news of the raid of Calethwyn has reached the upper and eastern sections of the Kingdom of Dallensdale. I assume that all of the Fairlands will know of this by sundown of today. A carrier falcon brought a letter from the capital with the seal of the king. It was meant for you. Finally, the lords have stopped all communication just yesterday. It would seem that small seeds of grievances grown into all-out disdain for one another. I have sent falcons to all lords in the realm, but have not gotten a written response.
Emery hands Devon the sealed letter. The red seal circle had an engraved owl holding both a book and a sword. Devon breaks the seal and opens the parchment scroll. Devon reads the letter to himself. He stops after a few moments and remains silent. He drops the letter on the table and looks upon his council.
The Grand King has been slain, assassinated no doubt, upon his vessel while travelling down south to the Herlandian Empire. There is nothing I can do now, for my father's brother was taken from our kingdom far too soon. His life and legacy will be avenged by whomever murdered him.
The room goes silent, and some rest their heads down, staring at the council's table. Emery leans in and says,
My lord, if I am not mistaken, you are in line for the throne. In times like these, where we are unsure of how other lords will react, perhaps we should bolster your personal security.
You are very thoughtful, Emery. With this new discovery of bad news, I am now 8th in line for the throne. There is still the direct descendants of Ruthard Asterfell, including his daughters, then on to my older brother than myself. I do not believe that extra security is in order, but healthy caution is necessary. Double the guards in the Amberstill village, as well as the docks. We do not want too many strangers walking around.
Devon points to Squire Iraine.
Is the horse fed and healthy, Squire?
Resting and unwounded, my lord, being brushed first thing this morning.
Good. Find him some armor. He is going into battle. You are dismissed.
Squire Iraine nods and leaves the room quickly. Guard Fernan stands up straight and clears his voice.
My lord Devon, I do not wish to cause a disturbance, but we learned something important about that woman you brought. She is in disguise. She is not who she says she is. From her belongings, letters, and brooch, we believe that she is the last of Ruthard Asterfell's children, the Princess Minnesondra Asterfell. She has not awoken yet, but she kept groaning in her sleep to not be taken away.
Devon looks around the room and slumps back into his chair.
Thank you, Sir Fernan. Inform the daytime guard and my wife of your findings. Perhaps another woman will help her feel less anxious in the mind. Katarana, what do the gods make of this? What have you heard?
Much has been spoken to me, around me, and through me, my Lord Devon. A transparent scream flew down to us from the north. A crow stands perched on a leafless tree. The visions of burning fields and scorched homes pollute my mind. Beware the messenger and the teeth of the hunter. A plan, set in motion, that no man or army can stop for it, was planned long before we stepped foot in Amberstill. For we cannot escape our fate, but we may diverge it from swallowing our souls. When you pass the runic stone, give upon him a drop of blood, for he will protect you from falling into the abyss we call the Wither.
The room remains silent, and Guard Fanan leaves the room, for he wished not to hear such a ill omen.
News from the gods can never be good in times of civil strife, for it is a sin on them. Thank you, Katarana. Roskev, as you may already know, you have lost a dear friend. What other news from our network?
Roskev clears his throat and speaks softly.
Clarus was trained from the best. I will notify his family immediately. It would seem, though, that all his spies have gone dark. Word from the Astarian kingdoms is that they will not use military force if war breaks out. Same goes for the Hellenian Empire. However, my spies report that money is flowing into the capital city, and it is a large sum payment. If we would think that civil discourse is of only our own fault, we would be fools. I believe that someone is financing these efforts. Also, my Lord Devion. Spies from the north have seen early signs of encampments being built just north of our border. The flags hail from the kingdom of Asterfell.
Devion gets up from his chair and places his hands on the table.
It would seem that we have less time than we anticipated. From the northern border, it would be a 7 days march in the summer. We have only one choice. We all came into this chamber, knowing it would be the end result as well. We go to war. Marshal Hathard, call the Herald and assemble the levies as quick as you can.
Hathard bows, holding his sword's pommel.
Yes, my lord.
Emery, saddle your horse and be ready for war. You're riding with me in the cavalry.
With pleasure, Lord Devion.
McCoynes, you are now head of Castle Amberstill. Get it ready for the defensive. Katarana, go out to the villages nearby and preach our God's love. Make sure the elderly, women and children are in good health. Keep them fed. Roskev, place a spy into every army, from here to the tip of Sealand. In addition, you are now undercover as a cook. Watch for any spies entering our army.
Devion unsheathes his sword and lifts it in the air.
For the kingdom of the Fairlands.
Everyone unsheathes their weapons.
For the Fairlands!
Hathard exits the room and enters into a small corridor, then up a narrow staircase to the top of Castle Amberstill's tower. He enters a room with a large curved horn and blows into it. War was now on the horizon. A couple days passed as men from inside the province begin to fall into Amberstill Castle. They muster their weapons and armor as the knights of the realm start to train them in the inner ward. Supplies from all over the land begins to pile into the granaries and storehouses of Amberstill. Devion and Hathard watch as the castle goes into mobilization on the castle balcony. Hathard and Devion, both wearing large fur pelts over their mail leather armor, watching. Devion looks down at the levies, training in the field below.
We will need more men for this task, Hathard. If our enemy is as prepared as we think they are, we will not stand a chance.
Hinthard points to the line of people entering into the Amberstill village.
More people come every day, my lord. I know we are losing the initiative, but we must have our army consolidate first.
Hathard, you will disagree with me on this, but I know what is best for our realm. I will redeem the oath that was owed to me. I will call them from the mountain.
Hathard sighs and looks up to the mountain ahead of him.
I do not understand why you did not conquer them when you had the chance. Instead, you befriended a group of savages, no more closer than raiders, mind you. I do not want them causing a stir in my army as I hold these levies together.
Devion goes inside and sits down next to a roaring fire. Hathard follows.
This is my kingdom. From the first day I ruled, I watched over this land, like they were my own brothers and sisters. When coming across the mountain, folk I spoke with them, ate with them, drank with them. I fought side by side with them. They gave me their oath that I may call on them for war, and 12 years later, that call will be answered.
Hathard crosses his arms.
A high price for going to war with someone who ate and drank for them. What did you do to receive this oath?
Devion looked into the fire with keen eyes.
I swore to their god that I would protect the mountain from desecration. I saw it, spoke to it for many hours. By the end of it I honored him, and slit my hand and gave it my word.
Devion shows Hathard the blade scar on the palm of his hand.
I was told that no outsider had done what I did. I became bloodkin with these people. I protected their lands from that day, and even the days before. They will fulfill their oath.
11 days total has passed since the Herald was called. Devion was in the armory of his castle, tightening the leather strap on his mail armor, sheathing his boot dagger, short sword, small one-shot crossbow, and finally his long broadsword. Engraved on the blade were the words Warden of Amberstill, and the guard was of thin silver steel. He sheathed it with great care, for this sword never faltered and broke many others in times of battle. Devion, suited for war, exited the armory to find his eldest son, Devon Asterfell II, standing in a small suit of armor.
Father, you will not go alone in battle. Let me come with you. Let me be your knight. Mother insists I stay, but I must prove myself before the age of 14. Please, Father.
Devion walks over as his son begs and places his forehead on his son's.
All men have their duty. Oftentimes we cannot choose our duty, but we are given it not explicitly, but implicitly. Now look into your heart, and in your mind, what is your duty?
Devion's son looks down at himself and around the castle walls.
To protect our home.
Yes, but more importantly, to protect your mother, your younger brothers and sisters. You do not know war, only stories of war.
Devion unsheathes his broadsword and lays his blade on his son's shoulder.
I, Devon Asterfell, on this day pronounce you as head of royal guard. Protect the royal family until your dying breath. Do you understand, my son?
His son nods.
Yes, Father. Thank you for bestowing this upon me.
Devion sheathes his blade and begins to exit the castle. He opens the keep's door and looks back to see Felithora and their 5 children.
Remember what I told you, Felithora.
She nods and begins to cry. Devion slowly looks away from his family and sees his army outside ready for orders and in a large column. Devion steps outside and enters the inner courtyard. He sees Emery, clad in plate armor, on his horse, bowing towards him. Devion nods and goes towards Hathard.
My lord Devion, your troops are assembled. 5,952 altogether. We were off by 300. Here is the horn that you requested. I trust your judgment, my lord. Call them down.
Devion nods and grabs the old large curved horn from Hathard. He steps into the middle of the courtyard and breathes heavily. He blows into it, letting out a low, loud, reverberating tone. He holds that tone for a few seconds and repeats, then again and again. He places the horn around his chest and looks up at the mountain. Nothing is heard but the slight gusts of wind and armor rubbing against one another from the levees. Suddenly, in the distance, a drum beat can be heard. The rhythm of the drums became louder and louder until the war chants of men could be heard coming down from the mountain. Pebbles began to fall, and the banners of their tribes could be seen. It was a dark brown cloth with a plaid pattern of green and orange. In the middle was a design of a mason axe crossing one another. The levies of Devion's army were nervous, but soon realized that they were in good company. Morale was high, for the warriors of the mountain were not armored well, but were large in size. Carrying weapons of raw iron and large square shields, they numbered 4,000 strong. Ahead of the mountain tribes was Ginsfraut Ironfist, a tall, brawny man with long, scruffy, dark brown hair and long beard. He had scars from wolves all over his face and neck, and looked down on Devion and smiled.
It is good to see a fellow bloodkin in good shape, Lord Devion. We are with you until you relieve us of service.
Ginsfraut says, slamming his shield against his axe. His soldiers begin to do the same. Devion looks over at Hathard.
Let us march.
Hathard nods and blows his own horn, signaling for the march to begin. Devion's army begins to leave the castle. They raise their banner high up, a red plaid design with an emblem of a gold line in the middle of an X, all inside a shield with pine needles on each side. The clanking of swords, halberds, axes and maces echo through the mountain pass. Families of the soldiers line up against the cold cobblestone road and say goodbye to their loved ones. The mountain men fall in line, and although not as professional, stay disciplined in their march. All leave the castle and head up the road towards the unknown. They soon are out of sight of Amberstill Breeze. The army marched through the province of Amberstill confidently as they passed by towns and villages from where they came from. All with views of mountain ranges, the land was blanketed with snow, and the sun beamed down on reflecting an angelic light from the warrior's armor. Many townspeople waved the soldiers off as they passed by. The army would march for 8 hours and rest, setting up camp near riverbanks. Although much could not be foraged, the men of the mountain knew their roots, nuts, and hunt for game. Supplies were plentiful for the time being, but years of war training kept Devion and his generals weary of what happens when rations are not fulfilled. The dark nights in the encampment were often bustling with talk and camaraderie. The mountain men and the Amberstill levies began to form a solid companionship for their love of drink and competitive sportsmanship. The camp soon became silent. Tents were scattered along the plains, banks and pine trees as the millions of stars light up the winter night, and a small planet can be seen far in the distance with a blue-green hue illuminating from it. Days pass. Devion and his army cross the Amberstill border into the province of Minster, a low-populated land comprised of thick, scattered woods, rollings, hills and farmland. Devion, following his vanguard, look over at a dead tree off the road. A raven looks down upon them and moves its head frantically. Devion stares into its eyes. The raven looks back at Devion and remains stooped on the branch of the rotted tree. He passes the tree and looks forward. The raven spreads its wings and flies north. Its croaks and calls heard in the distance. Devion gallops to the head of the army, where Hathard leads the march and rides beside him.
Hathard, keep on your guard. With the kingdom of Asterfell on the march, we must be prepared for anything.
Aye, my lord. Scouts have not reported Asterfell, but there is smoke up ahead.
Seems Caerleon was not the only town raided. Let us quicken our pace then, and head towards the smoke. Lord Muin was always a dear mentor. I cannot let his people suffer at the hands of Asterfell.
Hathard nods and blows a small horn in rapid succession 3 times. The soldiers quicken their march as they turn rightward onto a side road around a large mound following Hathard's trotting horse. In the distance, smoke plumbs are seen above the tree line. The army begins to investigate it and search through the trees, finding a small village torn apart and scorched by flames. Devion looks at his army.
Men, search the area. Look for any survivors.
Devion rendezvous with Hathard, Emery and Reskov in the village near the single intact building. Emery dismounts his horse and enters the building. He comes out with an empty basket.
My lord Devion, it would seem that they looted the granary and took all that was in there. I found no bodies, just rats and empty baskets.
Devion nods and looks over at his entourage.
They are desperate for food. They must be pillaging the whole countryside if they hit this small forest village. This does not bode well.
Several distressed voices can be heard in the distance, becoming louder as soldiers gather around an ash-scorched building. A soldier yells.
My lords, come quickly!
The entourage moves quickly up a small hill in the northeast part of the village. Many soldiers looking away from the ash pile, some praying frantically at the sight of a burned temple with charred villagers surrounding a large cracked stone with an etched owl on it. Devion's eyes widen in shock. Hathard and Roskev look around in disgust as Emery's eyes light up in anger.
They have defiled the sacred stone of Wellnock, my lord. Those godless heathens deserve to be hunted down and slain for their barbaric crimes. I swear on my honor that these bastards will pay for their contempt towards my god.
Emery clenches the hilt of his sword and cuts his hand upon the stone. Devion looks to Hathard.
Inform Ginsfraut and the other chieftains of this desecration. They will want to pay their respects.
Yes, my lord. Devion, will you heed Katarana's word, like Sir Emery?
I will honor Wellnock in battle, for I pray for him. I have already shed blood for another.
I beg my leave then, my lord.
Time passes as the soldiers finish digging the graves for the fallen villagers and bestowed their offerings. Ginsfrau walks over to Devion, looking at the ruined stone which stares back at him.
I am not knowing of the customs of you plains folk, but from my understanding, the old tribes of the Fairlands have always worshipped the same gods. Why, even when starving, destroy a temple and a place of worship to one of the oldest in the lands. One isn't doing many favors by doing that. I am angry, Devion. I have rage built in my blood. It burns like an inferno. I seek vengeance as well. Lead us into battle. My axe grows thirsty.
Ginsfraut looks at Devion, bowing slowly, and leaves towards his men. Roskev and Hathard come over and bow.
Lord Devion, my spies have reported movement of the Asterfell army just northeast of here by 5 miles. They must have hit this place and stocked up on supplies. I imagine they are well ready for a fight. Also, my lord, we have an unwelcomed visitor in our army. They are being held in my tent now for protection.
Roskev looks around for any prying ears as he speaks lower. Devion folds his arms.
Has a spy infiltrated our army? Roskev?
No, but best not discuss here. Come, I will show you.
Devion enters a large tent, and sitting in a chair surrounded by 2 guardsmen is the Princess Melisandre, wearing leather armor and has a sword to her side.
What in your mind made you believe that entering this army would have any benefit, especially unannounced? Do you understand who you are? You could be killed. We are about to fall into battle.
I am grateful that you saved me from the woods from the day of the raid, Devion. You do not understand, though. My family are not the type to watch others do their deeds. We are a family of action. Is my intention to fight? No, my intention is to be there for my people, all of my people. I demand to be present in your retinue to watch a leader lead so I may learn myself.
Devion breathes in deep.
A leader does not hide, even for the best intentions. I will allow you to join me, but not in battle. You will remain in the camp, and if we are defeated, you are to ride back to Amberstill. It is better to retreat than to be prisoner, Melisandre. Watch over her. Go to the quartermaster and get a good fitting armor suitable for a princess, or at least close to it. Then report to the war tent.
Melisandre gets up from the chair and bows gracefully.
Thank you, Lord Devion.
Devion looks upon her and exits the tent. He slams his fists against one another in anger.
I hire Roskev to keep this army clean. Now I have a princess. Fool.
Time passes. Devion enters the war tent. It is stationed on planks of wood with several chairs and a large table with a map on it of the Fairlands. Present in the room is Hathard, Emery, Roskev, Ginsfraut, Devion's 4 elite royal guard, Princess Minnesondra with her 2 guards and 3 army captains, who command the halberdmen, swordsmen, and bowmen, respectively. Devion raises up his one hand towards Minnesondra.
My entrusted companions, Princess Minnesondra Asterfell. For any who are not aware, the stakes of this battle is now not only for our home Amberstill, but for the kingdom of the Fairlands. Let us commence our plan. Marshal Hathard and Roskev give us the report.
Roskev points to the map.
Our spy reported that the army was not as large as expected, for only the Lord of Asterfell has mustered his men. The lords of Illun and Wershaw are not present, or at least their banners are not present. We estimate around 6,000 men.
Hathard interjects.
The Asterfell army is hiding within a small forest, but are close to the border. Not many vantage points around the area, so we will most likely need to meet them head-on. As we know, the Kingdom of Asterfell are known for their lances. We are to watch for their cavalry. Have the halberd men in front, and Ginsfraut and his infantry behind. Emery will lead the cavalry, and we will maneuver wherever they are needed.
Aye. Let us place the archers behind the swordsmen. I will accompany them, and will support Ginsfraut in his advances. Let's keep 200 men in reserve in the back lines to cover the archers, if there is a sneak attack from their cavalry. Bowmen will loose at the biggest target. Princess Minnesondra. Fall in behind the reserve men and find a small vantage point.
Yes, my lord.
The rest of the room repeats as they gather their things and leave the tent. Snow begins to slowly fall upon the camp. Devion's army stands on the icy plains outside of a small brush of trees, the mountain men's eyes beaming with fury as they stand still, awaiting for a sign from the tree line across from them. The levies looking at one another, gripping their weapons tight and breathing heavily as snow begins to fall harder on them. The sky was dark grey, and the cold winds start to stir in the plains. Particles of snow fly in the air like mystical wisps. Devion looks up at the sky and at his entourage, all on horses in front of the army, awaiting if the leaders of the Asterfell army will meet them for negotiations.
Perhaps they are ashamed at their actions at Wellnock's temple.
Imri states in a brash manner.
Whatever it is, they don't want to speak to us.
Roskev, send a message with terms of surrender or a duel between lords. There is no need for unnecessary bloodshed.
Aye, my lord, it will be done.
Roskev begins to gallop towards the tree line. Alone in the tundra of wind and ice, Roskev gallops faster. Devion's army watches as he becomes smaller in the distance. In a moment's time, faint black lines can be seen in the sky. Arrows fall on Roskev and sounds of galloping ceases, for he laid on the field with no sign of movement. Devion begins to shake in anger as he'd made a grave mistake, trusting in goodwill. A horn is blown from across the field, large boulders fling from the trees and up to the air in an arched motion. Hathard yells,
"Trebuchets, get down!"
The trebuchets' projectiles fall onto Devion's army. A plethora of armored men, wearing colors of red and yellow, begin charging out from the tree line, charging at Devion's position. He unsheathes his sword, and in a frenzy yells,
"Men, charge!"
Hathard grabs his horn and blows it, initiating the charge. The armies of both kingdoms cover the field, the distance between them becoming shorter. The halberd men drop their points down, and before they reach their foe, they drop down on one knee. Sweat drips down their necks as they can see the eyes of their foes. The Asterfell dismounted knights and levies clash into the halberds' wall. Furious fighting ensues as the front lines begin to push into one another, swords swinging rapidly and in an undisciplined manner. Ginsfraut and the mountain men squeeze through the halberd line and begin slaying the Asterfellian troops. a rain of arrows falls onto the back lines of the Fairlandians. Devion's archers loose their arrows into the trees, taking out the archers hiding in the woods across the field. Another round of trebuchet fire lands onto the disarrayed front line, inflicting casualties on both sides of the battlefield. Devion pushes forward and fights alongside the mountain men, slaying foe after foe. The first line of Asterfell soldiers began to flee, and another battalion of mace men joined the fray. The snow began to fall faster on the battlefield, and many pockets of soldiers fought one another across the large plains. Arrows rained on each side, and trebuchet fire landing in random spots on the battlefield. Almost hitting Devion, he knew that they needed to be taken out. Devion initiated a forward charge that broke through the mace men's line. He now stood next to Roskev's body. Devion, seething with anger, unleashed his fury. He protected Roskev's body with all his might. Soldier after soldier charged Devion, and all fell by his sword. Devion forgot his orders, commands and sense of space, for he was becoming surrounded by the enemy. Emery, seeing his lord be overwhelmed, blew the horn for the cavalry charge, and soon smashed into the enemy's ranks. The Asterfellian army braced for the charge, and fought like cornered animals, as they were now on the verge of running for their lives. Devion grabbed Hathard, who jumped to the lord's side.
Defend him, Hathard. I will lead.
Devion broke through the last line of troops and charged towards the tree line and entered the forest with a few of his men. There were a few Asterfellian archers who remained and were overtaken by Devion's advance. In sight were the trebuchets. Devion surged towards them, and before they could release another round, he slashed them with his broadsword. The trebuchet crew began to flee for their lives as the Lord of Asterfell stood there. Weak and feeble-looking, he raised his sword and shield to the best that he could. Devion swung his sword down on his blade, breaking it in two and slashing into Lord's chest. His shield drops from his hand and falls to his knees.
Lord Devion, you shall pay for well-knocked desecration, blasphemer,
he said with his last breath. The Lord of Asterfell falls to the ground. Devion, shaking for he could not lift his sword any longer, falls on one knee with his sword firmly in the ground and breathes heavily. He looks back at the fading battlefield as the sound of iron on iron begins to dim. Devion looks down at the Lord of Asterfell and back at the battlefield and sheathes his weapon. His soldiers catch up to him.
Men, capture any fleeing Asterfellian and bring the prisoners to the field. Search their camp for any supplies.
They oblige and enter the camp as Devion exits the forest. The field, covered in bodies and agonizing horrors, left Devion speechless. He looked across the field and saw one of his soldiers looking down at his foe. Holding onto his leg, he began to wobble. He then fell onto the snow. The prisoners were assembled in the field. There were around 500 altogether, surrounded by the remnants of Devion's army. Devion stood in front of them and yelled,
"Upon this day, you are defeated. Your lord has been slain. Many have routed north back to Asterfell, and the lives of you all now rests in my hands. I look on you and know that you are disadvantaged from the start. Weak, feeble, starving. For all of you to know, I am Devon Asterfell, Lord of Amberstill, and claimant of the throne of the Fairlands. I look upon you and see my brothers, forced to fight for a battle that meant nothing but loss, torment, and humiliation. I wish I could recruit you in this army, but you have slain many of my own. Families with no father now. My recommendation, flee to mainland Astaria, wait for the war to be over. For Asterfell will fall not by my hands, but by the ones that perpetrated our aggression towards one another. My brothers in arms, I give you 2 weeks' food and free passage back to your home, for none more will be given."
Devion looks back at Ginsfrult, Emery, and Hathard. Emery with a furious look on his face.
How could you let these heathens leave, and with our food? They slaughtered our own. You are endangering us all, my lord Devon.
I agree. These men should be taken to the executioner's block.
Devon looks at the soldiers blessing him as they leave.
This army did not ransack Lord Muin's village. Look at them. They have been starving for days now. Where was their cavalry in battle? Nowhere to be seen. What do you think happened to their horses? Lord Evingston of Asterfell, before he died, accused me of ransacking the same village and defiling Wellnock's temple. Another group had scorched the temple, not them.
Imri, surprised, looks at the fleeing Asterfellian soldiers and down to the ground. Hothard interjects,
So the fury of Asterfell and Amberstill was unleashed on one another for the same reason, yet neither is to blame. What do you make of this, Devon?
I am in the dark as you are, Hathard. With Roskev gone, we will have to make decisions without the eyes of hills and the ears of trees. Let us bury the dead and tally our losses. After that, we will make a decision.
After a grueling day of digging graves, the total losses for Devon's army was 3,500 troops. Dropping his army down to half, many others were injured or wounded severely. They returned to camp and rested to heal from the wounds of their battles and the loss of their brethren. Devon's heart weighed heavy, for his emotions got the better of him in battle. He washed his hands in a bucket of water, for he was slashed on top of his left hand. He wrapped it in a white cloth and exited his tent and looked out to his men. They were not so eager to revel even after a victory. The reality of war began to set in, for they have been camped around a burned village now for 3 weeks. Many of the wounded healed and were back to proper health. Others were not so lucky, and extra graves had to be dug. The chilled winds blew across the camp, and morale was low. Devon walked to the quartermaster, ordering ale to be distributed to the men, for the night was cold. Their spirits were lifted, if only for the night. Ginsfraut, holding a clouth, sat by the blazing campfire and played it slowly. The tune was sad and melancholic, for he played for his dead kin. Another one of his lieutenants joined in with another crwth, and soon Emery joined in with a small harp. The men heard this and started to circle around and listen to the song. Another nameless soldier brought his flute and played with the men. Devon listened and closed his eyes and enjoying the song. It ended and many clapped. They began playing other tunes that were more light-hearted, songs of their triumphs and heroes. The night ran late for all. The next morning, a falcon came flying from the northwest. It bore a letter with the seal of Asterfell, the same seal that flies on Devon's banner.
My lord, a letter bearing your seal flew reportedly from the direction of the capital,
said Hathard. Devon's eyes lit up in relief.
It must be from my brother writer. Give it over.
Devon opens the seal and reads the letter in silence. Moments pass.
I have grave news. It would seem that the royal family has been slain by the Lord of Silland. According to my brother, they laid siege to the capital, and using a spy, they opened the gates, and now Lord Brucewell sits on the throne. My brother asks for assistance on recapturing the throne, and to meet him at the mouth of Dallen's mountain outside the capital.
My lord, this information is conflictive. Princess Minnesondra is alive and well. Does he believe that the throne is his now?
Emery states bluntly.
Perhaps your brother Lord Devon does not know that Minnesondra escaped, or propaganda from Lord Brucewell reinstating himself as the true lineage.
My brother only knows what he sees. He must have put 2 and 2 together. My brother is an honorable man. If he knows that Melisandre is alive, he would die to place any royal family member on the throne, old or young.
Aye. Then what is the next course of action, my lord?
Hathard grabs a piece of parchment and ink.
Write back, stating that Princess Melisandre is alive and well, and resides in our army. We will arrive at the mouth of Dallen's Mountain in 1 week's time. The snow will delay us until then. Tell him it will be an honor to fight alongside him. Use our fastest falcon. We move out as soon as we're able.
Yes, my lord, right away.
They leave Devion's tent. He places his hands over his eyes and looks at the seal of Asterfell.
A grim day in the history of my family's dynasty. Rest in peace.
Devion leaves his tent and enters the tent of Melisandre's.
Princess, we must speak of grave news.
Melisandre places her hands over her heart.
What is it, Lord Devion?
Her voice shaking.
We have gotten word that the rest of your family have been slain by Lord Brucewell of Sireland. According to my brother, he has acquired the throne. You are now destined for the throne of the Fairlands. I know this is much to bear, but time is waning. We are heading out as soon as we are able.
Melisandre sits, and tears begin to fall down her cheek as her eyes swell red.
My heart is broken. In such a short time I was never going to be queen, and now I am. I am not ready. I know nothing on how to rule, and I feel so alone.
Devion walks over to her and holds her.
We cannot control where or when events happen, for the gods only know this. Do your family proud, be strong, and be brave, for they now look upon you to carry the legacy that they have built before you. You are never alone, cousin.
Devion places his hand on her shoulder.
You ride next to me. You will be safe. I promise you this, Melisandre.
Devion leaves her tent, and she looks at the locket on her neck, the one her mother gave her. Devion's army begins to move out, the snow falling lightly across the land. They assemble in a column formation and move out from the village, entering back onto the main road westward. The snow reaching as high as their boots, the soldiers push forward, knowing that reinforcements are ahead. The supply wagon's wheels begin to break in the harsh conditions. For a day they are stalled and resume their march. They enter into a hilly forest region as the road increases in elevation. Dense fog begins to set in as they are surrounded by large pine and oak trees. The sounds of crows caw as they fly above the marching army. The clouds begin to grow dark as the sun behind them begins to fall. The crows soon become silent, and only the gusts of wind can be heard flowing between the tree limbs, branches snapping around them. Devion, riding alongside Melisandre, looks around the woods. The army stops suddenly, and an order could be heard from the front. Devion looks over at the princess and begins to ride to the front of the army, Melisandre following. They gallop up the icy road to Hathard, and on the road is a large destroyed watchtower that used to stand on the small hill left of them. Hathard worryingly says,
"My lord, we must go around the tower or turn back around. I do not like this position."
Devion looks around, hearing the breaking of branches.
Oh no, it was a trap.
Brace your flanks. Ambush.
Huge balls of flame ignite on both sides of the army above them from the hills. They roll down, and with momentum and great force, split the army in many sections. A large array of men clad in black leather armor fall upon the surprised army. Arrows and javelins are thrown and shot from above. Devion's troops scramble to form a defensive line and surround Devion and Melisandre.
Protect the princess. She must get out!
Devion unsheathes his blade and rides back down the road. Melisandre, Hathard and his royal guard following, traversing through their own men, fighting and defending their position. Devion slashing at the dark-armored raiders and creating a path for the princess to follow as he weaves through the many layers of soldiers and raiders. Another large hay ball of fire falls in front of Devion. His horse, Hazelnut, is hit and falls to the ground and runs away into the woods as arrows and javelins fall on his position. Devion looks up at his guard with shields raised high, blocking the arrows.
My lord, get up, we must move.
One of his guards pulls him up from the ground, and they begin moving down the road. Devion's army, taking heavy losses, begins to retreat down the road as much as they can. Emery blows his war horn that is heard in the distance, signaling a charge from his cavalry.
I must go back and salvage as many lives as I can. We will hold them as long as we are able. We will rendezvous back at Amberstill Castle. Go now, before it's too late and they block the escape route. Emery and I will cover you.
Devion nods and runs in front of Melisandre, slaying foe after foe as they begin to exit the column of soldiers. Devion looks back and only sees Melisandre, for his royal guard did not make it out of the ambush. Devion and the princess run off the road and into the woods. Devion, slightly limping for the fall from his horse, injured his leg. The clamour of swords and battle shouts began to fall dimmer as they ran, going deeper into the forest south, back towards Amberstill. Melisandre falls to the ground, for the snow was up to her shins. Devion grabs her and places her on his back, forcing himself through the thick snow, ploughing through, his adrenaline still flowing through his body. His vision was blurry and sound was muffled as he continued pushing his body harder and harder. Night fell on them. The clouds, beginning to disperse, revealed the bright, shining, starry night once again. Devion drops Melisandre below a tree in the middle of an opening in the forest. A small creek of water flowed past. Devion refills his water skin and drinks from it, handing it to Melisandre. He begins to sheathe his blade, but in the distance across the clearing stood a large warg, staring at him unmoving. Skinny with ragged fur, the large wolf snarled at Devion and begins to strive leftwards. Devion, with cold, dead eyes, held his blade defensively across his body and strives rightward slowly. His eyes interlocking with the wargs, they both wait for who will strike first. The warg howls and runs towards Devion with an untamed frenzy and jumps at him with his mouth and claws extended. Devion dodges and swings his blade wildly, missing the warg. They have switched sides. The warg throws his paws in the air and his claws slash Devion on the chest, piercing through his armor. Devion in return yells and swings his sword, slashing the warg's paw. Devion goes on the defensive and swings his broadsword as the warg begins to fall back. It runs in a semicircle around Devion and pounces at him once again. This time he hits Devion down to the ground with his broadsword now disarmed. The warg goes in for the kill, and in a moment's time Devion unsheathes his short sword and raises it up, defending him. Devion's blade slicing through the warg's heart, it falls beside him lifeless. Both lay there for a moment. With Melisandre yelling Devion's name, he gets up and looks up at the sky and back down to see the warg's pack standing on the outskirts of the forest clearing, looking at their slain pack leader. Devion puts his foot on the dead warg and raises his blade at the pack. They look at Devion, and one of the wolves starts leaving. The other wolves begin to follow, and they scamper away into the deeper parts of the thicket. Devion waits for the sounds of the wolf pack to leave, and as they do, he falls to the ground. The night ends, and Devion wakes up underneath the tree in the clearing, with a fire next to him, and Melisandre looking at the dancing flames.
You are awake. Thank the heavens. Do you feel all right? Do you feel that you have a fever? You were wounded dearly, so I cleaned it the best I could.
No. I feel fine besides the pain from my chest. Thank you for patching me up and cleaning the wound. How long was I unconscious?
A day and a half. I have been eating cooked warg meat. Here, have some. It will replenish your strength. I do not know how you defeated him. I thought we were surely dead when he hit you to the ground.
I thought we were dead as well. Even now I do not even feel alive. Let us move before another pack shows up.
Devion eats his fill and packs some for their journey home. Both of them continue through the woods, eventually coming across a side road in the province of Amberstill. They were only a few miles away from the castle now. A total of 6 days have passed since the ambush on the main road towards Dallan's Rock. They come over a hill and see the castle, its flags flowing in the light gusts of wind. The town before it was quiet, and the castle grounds themselves seemed still. Devion and Melisandre walk up the road through the town square before the gates of the castle, many of the buildings laid empty. They approach the castle's gate and hail the gate guard. The guard looks down below and orders to open the gate. Devion and Melisandre enter the inner ward of the castle. Felithora and his family spew out of the keep, running towards Devion ecstatically. They jump on him and hug his chest, legs and arms as he slightly cries out in pain. Felithora embraces Devion passionately and kisses his cheek. Marshal Hathard, with a wound on his forehead, comes out of the keep, watching the reunited family. Melisandre walks towards Hathard and gives him a hug. The gate closes and Hathard approaches Devion.
My lord, it's good to see you alive. Not necessarily well, however, but it's good that you are back. We were not able to fully repel the ambush. Many of the soldiers were lost. Emery and I were able to escape from the road, but only because Ginsfrau covered our retreat. I don't think he will be coming back.
Devion looks to the ground in sadness and clenches his fist.
Ginsfrau, you will never be forgotten, my friend.
Emery and I were then split since we were pursued. I arrived here with around 240 men. The rest was with Emery. A total of 300, I suppose, followed him. We did it to lose them. However, it has been 2 days, and Emery has not returned.
McGuines walks up towards Devion.
My lord Devion, it is good to see you back home. When you left, we sent several messages, one of them being that the princess had escaped, but it seems our falcons were being intercepted. I sent a rider but lost your trail after the major snowstorm. Many of the elderly women and children have departed the land. They have travelled to mainland Astaria towards the city of Westervex in the kingdom of Sefland. They will be safe there. The last boat will be ready to depart by tomorrow morning.
And what of Katarana? Have you heard from her since she departed?
McCoy sighs and replies.
I have not heard or seen her, Devion. I am sorry.
Suddenly, a horn is blown from a distance, a familiar horn. Hathard looks towards the direction.
Emery, he has come back. Praise the gods for his return.
The horn is blown again, and Devion's smile fades.
It seems he's not alone either. Man the walls with our remaining archers, the rest of you under the battlements. McCoy's. Get that boat ready immediately. Gather the remaining civilians and send them there.
Devion and Hathard go up the wooden stairs to the top of the walls of the castle, archers filling the empty positions and in between the crenulations of the walls. Hathard pulls out a long ocular spyglass.
A gift from Ruskev. It looks as if Emery is around a half a mile out, but I do not see any other armies behind him. It looks as if there are 100 men behind him, far fewer than what I saw him with last.
Devion looks down at the gatehouse guards.
Open the gates. Send out some men to help the returning wounded.
The gate opens, with several soldiers securing the village square outside the gates. Devion walks out to greet Emery as he arrives.
My lord Devion, prepare the castle's defences. It is Castius. His raiders were the ones who ambushed us, my lord. He was using your brother's banners.
Devion's heart sank, as for he now knew that the letter was not from his brother, and that he was lured onto the road. He had been played and now trapped between Castius and the sea. Devion replies,
Hathard is inside the castle, along with 200 men. Get inside and prepare the horses with Squire Erain.
Emery bows in pain.
Yes, my lord.
Devion looks out in the distance as the sun beams through the clouds for a second and again vanishes. He falls back and the gates close shut. The guards begin to prepare the defenses. Arrows being replenished on the battlements, the gates being reinforced with slabs of wood and steel. All that remained of Devion's army now were 450 levies and 50 cavalrymen. The village was evacuated, and the remaining civilians were heading down the road through the opposite gatehouse towards the docks, where the final ship now lay anchored. Devion saw Squire Iraine and stopped him of his duties.
Iraine, you have done all that you could. Now please take this and go to the boats, await for Princess Minasondra there, and abide by her command. You hear me? You are now a knight, Iraine, a warrior of the Fairlands. Go. May you follow pace, Iraine.
Devion hands him his short blade. The newly appointed knight bows.
Thank you, Lord Devion. I shall report to the princess now. Please come back to us, will you?
Devion watches Iraine run towards the dock. Princess Minasondra and a few guards come up to Devion. Minasondra speaks softly.
You are the bravest lord my father could have ever had, Lord Devion. Your commitment to our family and to the protection of my own life has been seen by the gods. Your next life favours you. Let my prayers hasten your blade. Goodbye, Lord Devion, my beloved cousin.
She exits the castle and leaves for the boat dock below. Devion looks to the ground and around the courtyard. He spots his family and approaches them with haste.
Oh, for Felithora, my love, my children, you must go now. We will keep them at bay while you and the rest depart.
Devion gives each one of his 5 kids a hug and a kiss as they begin to be scared and confused from all the loud noises. They cry at his feet while he passionately hugs Felithora.
I cannot go. As long as Castius is alive, he will hunt you and the children down. Do not tell me not to leave you, for you know what I will say. We have no time, Felithora.
I know, Devion. I saw this moment in my dreams. Wait for me, Devion. Promise me.
I will wait an eternity. Now go.
A horn is blown at the battlements. Frantic commands can be heard, and Hithard runs up to the walls. Devion looks at his eldest son.
Remember what I told you. Remember my voice and what has happened here. Take this for keepsake, and play it when you need courage, for I will always be there.
Devion pulls out a small box given to him by Clarus. His son slowly takes the music box and nods.
Thank you, Father.
He could barely speak the words as Felithora rushes them away, along with the other civilians still going down to the docks. Devion watches them make it down the hill towards the horizon. The sun in the distance breaks through the clouds on the horizon. The water on the sea glistens as the sun begins to set. Devion looks at the horizon and down at his body, his chest wounds still slightly bleeding from the warg. Devion's strength wanes with each passing moment. He looks at his chest and realizes that the claw marks have become infected. Devion looks up quickly. A cold sweat falls down his neck. He ties his armor tighter and coughs.
Looks like they weren't cleaned thoroughly. I guess that this is my fate.
Hathard, from the opposite side of him, yells from the battlements.
Devion! My lord Devion! They approach!
Devion reaches the top of the battlements, and in the near distance, a large army of mercenaries could be seen mobilizing into position, with the banners of his brother flying above in the backline, along with the flags of Dalenrock, Ginsfraut's flag, and the flags of a 6-winged crow. The flag of Castius's mercenary force. Devion takes position on a higher level of the walls. Emery falls behind Hathard, and Hathard behind Devion.
My lord, we are with you.
I, Lord Devion, as am I.
McGoynes comes wearing all red-clad, holding a long bow.
No one is setting foot in this castle without an arrow in their gut. Just say the word, my lord.
Devion unsheathes his broadsword and lifts his sword high.
My fellow men in arms, brothers that I call my own, my bloodkin who stand on these walls today, it has been an honor to fight and bleed alongside you, for I shall find you in the afterlife and dine with you until all eternity. Those who find pleasure in gold and deception, rather than creating and cultivating life itself. Like a disease, it has spread to our home. We may have lost our blood, our lands, our birthright, but they will never take us alive. They will never subjugate our bodies and minds. They will never take us prisoner.
If they wish to die at our feet, let them come. I say let them meet their death.
For the lives of your families, for your ancestors who look upon you all today. Make them proud men. Now knock your arrows and open fire.
Devion yells to the heavens, and the rest of the soldiers shout with him, banging their shields, while the archers draw back their bowstrings and fire up in the air. A dark-toned horn is blown, and Castius's army storms towards the walls. They cram and weave through the village outside of the castle and roar as they bring up ladders to the wall. McGoynes, now commander of the archers, fires down on the invaders, many of them falling to the ground, arrows darting in every which direction down on them. Castius's archers now fire back and fly in each direction. Devion ducks and gives the signal to the gatehouse. They drop 2 cauldrons of hot liquid oil through a small hole that travels within the walls. The oil then exits out of 4 holes on both sides of the gatehouse, dousing the raiders below with steaming heat. McGoynes, with a lit arrow, now leans over the wall and shoots the oil below him. It bursts into flames and created a wall of fire, destroying their ladders. A volley of fire arrows are shot from the Amberstill archers, lighting their once praised village aflame, trapping a section of the raiders' army between 2 walls of fire. The archers shoot down at the fleeing raiders, taking them down one at a time. Devion looks over the wall. The trap had worked, and many below him are caught in the flames. He looks behind him at the horizon of the sea. The boat still has not departed yet, for the last of the supplies was just entering the transport. The flames begin to die down, and another wave of soldiers advance, with arrows raining down on the walls. Devion calls up the swordsmen as reinforcements are needed. Emery rejoins his cavalry as a battering ram is now at the gates, and they start bashing down the reinforced gate. The raiders begin to jump off the ladders onto the walls. Intense melee begins. Devion's army fights for every inch of the walls with fury and malice. Devion holds the right side of the wall, while Hathard commands the left side. Emery unsheathes his sword and prepares for the gates to be breached. The Amberstill hold the attackers fighting until their last breath. Devion slays another raider and soon sees Castius jump onto the walls. Holding a long, thick blade, bursts through the thin line of soldiers, allowing raiders to run free on the left wall next to the gatehouse. Devion rushes towards the gatehouse, weaving through his troops, fighting the endless horde as he approaches Castius. Devion slices through foe after foe until he now had locked eyes with Castius. For destiny had answered its call. Castius rushes at Devion, swinging his sword in a frenzy. Devion blocks attack after attack. Almost losing his footing, Castius kicks him in the chest and falls onto the far end of the leftward wall. Devion gets up as a raider comes behind him. Devion reposes his attack and stabs him and throws him off the wall. Castius and Devion are now alone on the wall across from the inner keep, between the front and back gatehouses of the square courtyard. As Devion breathes heavy, the front gate is breached. Emery blows his horn and charges into the infantry, breaching the inner ward.
After many years of waiting, I have finally burned your home to the ground, Devon Shatterblade Asterfell. Face it, the reality that you will not escape this place, and all that you created, and all that you love will be destroyed, and all that you love, you die. You are weak, and your arm is trembling now. I can see it in your eyes. You cannot run any longer, Devon. You have nowhere else to hide. You know, you are already dead.
Castius says with a twisted smile.
I have accepted the fate that is bestowed upon me, and I know that my deeds on this earth will bring me into the next. As for you, Castius, your deeds have brought nothing but shame, and your actions will be blackened out from the etchings of history. You were always an arrogant man, Castius, a man who thinks all tremble before you. Well, here I am, for your death falls soon upon you. You and Lord Brucewell of Saeland will die by the sword, and your head served on a pike in the Sea of Lords.
Castius laughs and walks towards Devon.
You are a fool. Brucewell is dead. He was nothing but a name. Your brother was the perfect bait as well. He now lies in ashes in the courtyard of Dalensrock along with the royal family. I wanted my revenge, and Sarilok helped me achieve it.
He lead me straight to you, so now I will get it. Now! Prepare to die!
Devon shouts in anger and charges at Castius, swinging his blade like a madman. Castius deflects the blows and punches Devon in the face as he swings wildly.
Where is Princess Minisandra, Devon? Tell me, and I will end your life quickly. Tell me!
Tell me!
Devon spits blood down onto the courtyard as he sees the walls becoming overrun with Castius raiders.
The Queen of the Fairlands is leaving on that boat. You will never catch her. She is gone, Castius.
Castius breathes heavily in anger as he watches the boat sail away slowly, still close to land. He shouts and swings his massive sword at Devon. He parries Castius' attacks and dodges off the wall, landing on the stable roof and jumping onto the courtyard. Castius looks again at the boat and down at Devon. He snorts and jumps down onto the stable and onto the courtyard, seething, for he loathed Devon with his entire being. Devon gets up and dodges his blade, swinging his own and deflecting it upwards, and their blades clash in the middle.
You call yourself a warden?
Castius yells and headbutts Devon, making him move back in the middle of the courtyard. Devon falls to the ground and grabs his boot knife and throws it at Castius. Piercing through his left shoulder, he belts out in pain and pulls it out now, carrying both his sword and dagger. Devon, on the defensive, moves backwards as he dodges the dagger and deflects Castius's blade. Devon then goes in for a feint swing left and switches right. Castius swings his large blade, cutting Devon's long blade, shattering it, and stabs Devon in the stomach with his own dagger. Devon is breathless for a second. Castius grabs him and throws him across the courtyard. Devon holds onto his wound as he looks around. Castius falls on one knee, for his shoulder begins to bleed heavily. On the ground, just 100 feet away, lies Emery, slain beside his horse. For his horse was injured by a spear and fell to the ground. Emery defended his horse until his last breath, slaying a total of 32 raiders. McCoynes shooting down into the courtyard, covering Hathard's retreat as the left wall had been lost. McCoyne sees Devon and calls his name and runs to the right side of the wall, fighting raiders while trying to get to him. Hathard blows his large horn, calling for an all-out retreat to the keep. Devon looks at Castius as he approaches him.
You were always the weaker of the Emperor's guard. Pathetic. Don't worry, Devon. I will make this painless. For Felithora, though, I will make her suffer.
Suddenly, Devon pulls out his one-shot crossbow and fires up into Castius's head. The bolt now stuck through his chin, up to the back of his skull. Castius falls back and drops his sword. Devon looks upon Castius and up into the sky. Flashes of Felithora's face is seen in his vision. A mixture of colors swirl as he touches fields of fruit and sees a tree of roots that create pool of fresh water. The sun beams on him as he closes his eyes. He reopens them, and he sees McCoy's defending his right side. To his left, Hathard yelling orders at his 15 remaining men. To the end, they stayed protecting their lord. To the last breath, they defended Devion's honor. Decades have passed since the Fairlandian Civil War. A man holding a silver-laced blade walks through tall grass into a stone-ruined structure. A small grave stood there hidden in the brush and unnamed, but had etchings of old Fairlandian on them.
To imagine that your actions so many years ago have saved the lands from eternal darkness. I miss you, Father. I love you, Dad. I still have the box you gave me. I plan on giving it to my first son as well. I wanted to listen to it again with you one last time.
Devion winds the music box and sits next to the grave. He listens to the tune, leaning his head on the stone, looking up at the large mountain in front of him.